Have you ever heard it said that when we receive a text message, we read that text message in the tone of the mood that we're currently in instead of the tone that the person who sent it intended? In this next passage in John chapter 2, that whole idea really jumps out to me because I find a lot of the time, unintentionally, I'm reading the Bible and the words that are written under the lens of the culture that I live in, completely unintentional. But then sometimes we might misunderstand and misread different sections of the Bible until we go back and start really digging into the culture at the time. In this passage here in John chapter 2, this is ascribed to being Jesus's first miracle. This is where Jesus turns the water into wine. And it's a very fascinating story for many reasons. But I know for me, every time I read it, this whole cultural context really jumps out to me. Because in this passage, we see Jesus's mother, Mary, come up to Jesus and she says, Jesus, the bride and groom, they're out of wine. And Jesus responds saying, Woman, what is that to me? Now, I know in my culture, if I was at a wedding and I was in earshot of a mother coming up to her son and she goes, Son, the bride and groom are out of insert anything here. And he turned around and was like, Woman, what's that? What problem is that of mine? The actual response of all of us around would be like, what did you just say to your mother? Like, we would literally take that as that the person said, Woman, what's that to me? Because in our culture, the only time the word woman in a sentence of speaking to a woman is used is usually done in that sort of way. But looking at the Bible, does that really seem like what Jesus might have done? Jesus is very much for the fact that children are meant to honor and respect their parents. Yes, Jesus was fully God. Yes, he was fully man, but he was also, upheld every single law, upheld every single commandment. And one of the commandments is to honor your mother and father. So I really think that in this context, and a lot of scholars turn around and say that what Jesus said is probably more like, Dear woman, what's that to me? And what is actually more meaning about what's that to me? I'm not really sure, because I actually find it really interesting that the next step is that Jesus's mother turns around and says to the servants, hey, whatever he says to do, you do. So she already knew the power that Jesus had. She already had confidence that Jesus was going to go through and that he was going to do something about it. So something in his response obviously gave her the confidence that he was going to do something about it, even though he had not done any signs or wonders or miracles in the region of Canaan of Galilee at this point in time. Now, from here, it's really interesting the steps that Jesus chose to take. We know from a lot of different passages when the number of 6 comes up, often that's referred to the number of man. So in this passage, we see quite clearly it says there are 6 pots, stone pots, for the whole purpose of the purification ritual. So not only are we seeing the number 6, which is the number of man, we're also seeing that the pots were used for the ritual of cleansing, for the ritual of getting clean. And often that would have been in the Jewish culture of before and after they ate their meal. And Jesus decides to use these pots that were the purpose of being cleaned, And that's what he turns from water into wine. It's quite an interesting picture, especially when we get to, so this is the beginning of his ministry. Then we see at the end of his ministry, well, towards the end, because he's there at the Last Supper and he picks up the wine and he says, "This is my body broken for you. Drink it," like the bread broken for you and the blood poured out for you. So the wine was to represent his blood that was being poured out and shed to cover our sins. So, as I say, I find it quite interesting that Jesus used the pots for purification to turn that water into wine. And this word purification does come up in other passages where it's talking about the cleansing of sin, where it is talking about all those different aspects. In this one, it is talking about those ceremonial pots. So it was that symbol, that image of washing your hands to be cleansed and to be clean. And that is what Jesus decides to use for his first miracle.